If Linda wants to stay here, she can sleep with the lawnmower. This isn't her house anymore. Scott's voice cut through the cold garage door, full of that smug, entitled laugh I'd come to dread. Rain lashed my face as I stood there, suitcase heavy in one hand, key in the other, a key that now fit nowhere. From inside, I caught the sound of glass clinking and Charles's voice booming approval. Megan's laugh was small, tight, the kind that makes a mother's heart ache. I saw shadows dancing on the kitchen wall. My family, toasting a future I was no longer part of. My phone buzzed. Megan's message, the final twist of the knife. Scott's family needs the guest suite tonight. Please, Mom, just use the garage. It's only temporary. I swallowed hard, fighting the burn of humiliation. The garage door squealed open, and I dragged my bag across oil stains and cracked cement. Past rakes and paint cans, my world shrunk to 4 freezing walls. On the workbench, a photo of Megan as a girl, her arm around me, smiling in a way she hadn't in years. 40 years building a home, and tonight, I'm sleeping with the garden tools. I wrapped up in a scratchy blanket, watching the golden house lights shimmer through rain-streaked glass, and whispered, "Let's see who really owns this place when the storm is over." And with trembling hands, I opened the hidden safe, making sure the real deed was still mine. What would you do if the ones you loved most locked you out? Sometimes the real story starts the moment the door closes. People always said our home was built on love, but love, like houses, is only as strong as its foundation. Sometimes cracks don't show until you hear them at night, shifting, whispering secrets through the walls. Frank and I started with nothing but muddy boots and hope. He once told me, "Linda, never give away all your power, not even for family." I brushed him off. Now I wish I hadn't. Megan grew up safe, our only child, bright, stubborn, always eager to please. We worked for every comfort she had, dance classes, summer trips, castle cakes. She thought the world was gentle, and I let her believe it. Then Scott arrived. Polite, ambitious, everything a mother could want, on paper. But the first handshake, something felt off. Maybe it was how he watched Megan, possessive, patient. Maybe the way he called me ma'am, too careful. Like a script. His father, Charles, ran a finance business, lending with a smile, collecting with a fist. Scott followed close, drawn to power, not people. When they visited, they talked deals, not family. Charles once eyed our mantle and said, "Nice place. Worth a fortune, in the right market." After Frank died, I tried to do right by Megan. I gave her 30% of the house, enough for security, not enough to lose it all. The real deed stayed locked away with me. Scott didn't know. Megan never asked. Scott played perfect at first, fixing things, pushing refinancing, dropping hints about leverage. Once I heard him on the phone. "Be patient. Once we have full control, everything changes." He smiled when I walked in. "Just business, Linda." I told Megan, "Someday you'll thank me for not giving you everything at once." She only laughed. "Mom, you worry too much. Scott would never—" She never finished that thought. Scott pressed Megan to finalize papers, left legal forms everywhere, insisted on meetings with lawyers, and acted surprised when I delayed. I noticed mail missing, keys moved, favorite vase replaced with some modern art thing. He joked about streamlining, but his eyes never really met mine. Most nights I lay awake, listening to the house creak and wonder what Frank would do. The foundation was shifting, and only I could feel it. Before you judge, ask yourself, how well do you know the people sleeping under your roof? The papers sat untouched, the real deed still hidden. Sometimes I caught Scott watching, not angry, not impatient, just calculating, as if he knew I was the last piece standing between him and a house he thought he'd already won. What would you risk to keep your family safe? Sometimes the cracks are quiet, but they always lead somewhere. You know, I always thought betrayal would come as some great storm. A fight, a slammed door, a final angry word you couldn't take back. But in my house, betrayal arrived slowly, like water leaking under a door. Quiet, persistent, cold. It started the week Charles's empire began to crack. People in our town had always whispered about the Reynolds men, about their interest rates, their collection tactics, how they helped families out until there was nothing left to help. But nobody dared challenge Charles, not until too many folks couldn't pay back what they owed. Suddenly, protesters stood on the sidewalk outside his office. The phone rang off the hook. News vans circled the block, catching every angry face and waving sign. At home, the pressure seeped into our walls. Scott paced the kitchen, checking his phone, cursing under his breath. Bills started piling up. I noticed a letter on the counter with final notice, stamped in red, half hidden under a stack of credit card offers. Megan tried to keep the peace, hosting family dinners, baking her famous chocolate cake. But I saw the fear in her eyes. She'd look at Scott, waiting for a smile that never came. And me? I felt myself becoming invisible. It was little things at first. Scott would make plans for dinner without telling me, just assuming I wouldn't mind eating alone. He replaced my old coffee maker with some shiny machine I didn't know how to use. Megan started going out more, volunteering for extra shifts at the library. At night, I'd find my favorite knickknacks missing from the shelves, replaced with glossy vases or designer candles that didn't smell like anything but money. I tried to talk to Megan. "Sweetheart, you sure you're okay?" She'd force a smile, say, "It's just a rough patch, Mom. Scott's under a lot of pressure. Once the business is back on track, he'll relax." I wanted to believe her, but my gut kept twisting. The storm outside kept growing. One morning, I woke to find Scott yelling into the phone in the driveway. "Just give me more time," he shouted. "Once the house is in Megan's name, we'll have the leverage. I'm handling it." When he saw me at the window, he slammed the car door and sped off, leaving tire marks on the drive. That night, Megan told me, "Scott wants to have a family meeting tomorrow. About the house. He says it'll solve everything." I nodded, keeping my face calm. But in my pocket, I clutched the small metal key to the safe deposit box, the only place the real deed lived. The next day, Scott arrived home with a folder full of papers and a forced smile. He set everything on the dining table, the one Frank built for our first Thanksgiving. "We need to finalize ownership, Linda," he said. "Banks get nervous when things are left unfinished. We can't risk it right now." His voice was flat, tired, but his eyes sharp as ever. He slid a thick document across the table. "Just sign here. This makes it official. Megan's the sole owner. It's what Frank would have wanted, right?" The words twisted inside me. Scott was right in a way. Frank always dreamed of passing the house to Megan. But never like this. Not as collateral. Not as some bargaining chip. Megan watched me, wringing her hands. "It's just paperwork, Mom. Scott says it'll keep us all safe." I picked up the pen. My hand shook. I could feel Frank's presence, his warnings, his lessons, echoing in the back of my mind. "Linda," Scott said, his voice low, impatient. I glanced at the document, reading each line. The notary's seal was missing. The numbers in the corner were off. In the signature block, Scott's handwriting had replaced Megan's. A fake, or at least a meaningless copy. Something to scare me into submission. I looked up, smiling. "You know, Scott, Frank always said never to sign anything you don't understand." He forced a laugh. "That's just old-fashioned. Things are complicated now." "Not that complicated." I took the pen, scribbled my name, and handed the document back. Scott's shoulders sagged in relief. He hugged Megan tightly, whispering, "It's done." But I knew better. The real papers, the ones with teeth, stayed locked away, where neither of them could touch. Days passed and the pressure at home only grew. Scott started snapping at Megan, blaming her for bills he couldn't pay, picking fights over nothing. Megan withdrew, shrinking into herself, her confidence chipped away piece by piece. One night as I washed dishes alone, I found my wedding ring in the trash, hidden beneath a pile of old receipts and broken glass. I held it in my hand, heart pounding. Frank's voice came back to me, gentle and wise. "People show you who they are, Linda. You just have to listen." The next morning, Scott shoved another stack of legal documents under my door. A post-it note on top. "Sign these before noon." But when I opened them, I saw the same mistakes. The missing stamp, the wrong address, the clumsy forgery. He was getting desperate. Megan started asking questions. "Scott, why is the bank calling me? Why are there strangers in the driveway? Why did Mom's name disappear from the mailbox?" Scott would brush her off, change the subject, or just leave the room. But Megan's eyes, once soft and trusting, began to sharpen. The walls in our home felt closer each day. At night, I'd stand at the window watching headlights sweep past, wondering if the next knock would be the sheriff or a debt collector. Yet through it all, I kept the real deed safe. I played my role, the worried, confused mother, just long enough for Scott to believe he'd won. And in quiet moments, I'd sit with Frank's photo, whispering, "You always said to trust, but verify." I'm listening now. I'm ready. Because sometimes the only way to save a house is to let everyone else think it's already lost. Have you ever trusted someone, only to watch them turn your whole life upside down? If you've ever survived a family betrayal, you know. It's never just about money. It's about who you become when the storm hits. Some walls keep you safe. Others close in so slowly you don't notice until you're struggling to breathe. It started with a single sharp knock at the front door, one Monday morning. I opened it to find two men in cheap suits, faces bland, eyes cold. "Is Mr. Scott Reynolds home?" one asked, business cards already out. I shook my head. "He's at work." The taller man nodded, not surprised. "We'll be back. Tell him it's about the overdue accounts." He glanced over my shoulder, scanning the entryway as if already measuring drapes for a house he meant to own. I watched their car idle at the curb, for a full hour before finally driving off. When Scott returned home, I handed him the business card, careful not to show how much my hands shook. He looked at it, swore under his breath, and stomped off without a word. From that day, the house seemed colder. Megan stopped humming as she cooked. She began double-checking the locks at night. I heard her on the phone with her best friend, her voice low and uncertain. "I don't know, Jen. Something's wrong. He's not himself lately." There was a silence. "No, he hasn't, but I just feel like I'm losing him. And maybe myself." As the days passed, Scott became a man possessed, haunted by phone calls, late-night emails, urgent texts from numbers he never shared. He started drinking coffee in the middle of the night, pacing the kitchen in bare feet, mumbling about timelines and settlements. Charles, his father, began calling several times a day, first angry, then desperate. "You need to fix this, Scott. They're threatening me now. You know what these people are capable of." Scott began pushing Megan harder. "You need to talk to your mother. Make her see reason. If she'd just finished signing, we'd have leverage. We could negotiate. We'd be safe." His tone wasn't cruel at first, just tired. But exhaustion has a way of turning into something darker. One evening, I found Megan at the dining table, her phone in hand, her face pale. "What is it, sweetheart?" She hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. There, in a string of texts between Scott and Charles, were words that hollowed me out. "Once she signs, it's all ours. She'll never know what hit her. Megan trusts me." I felt my daughter's pain as she said, voice trembling, "He never loved me for me. I'm just the key to this house, aren't I?" She broke down, sobbing, shoulders shaking, tears streaming. For the first time since she was little, Megan let herself be held, fragile and raw in my arms. "Did you ever regret loving me too much, Mom?" she whispered, guilt burning in every word. I squeezed her tight, burying my face in her hair. "No matter how dark the night gets, this house is still ours. Love isn't weakness, Meg. It's why we're still standing." From that night on, a quiet alliance formed between us, silent but unbreakable. Megan began to see Scott as he was, not as she wished him to be. But Scott, sensing the shift, grew more volatile. He demanded to know where I kept the real deed, accused me of hiding things, of plotting against the family. One afternoon, he cornered me in the kitchen, jaw clenched. "Why haven't you finished the paperwork, Linda? Are you trying to ruin us?" I stood my ground. "I'm protecting what Frank built. For Megan. For all of us. You want my signature? Earn my trust." Scott's face twisted in frustration. "Either you sign tomorrow or you're out for good." He pointed at the garage, cold, damp, a place for tools and trash, not for people. "If you're not with us, you're in there. That's final." He followed through. That night I found my suitcase packed by the door, my favorite chair gone from the living room, my bedroom stripped of photos and memory. Megan tried to protest, but Scott shut her down with a single chilling glare. So I moved into the garage, blankets on a folding cot, the hum of the old freezer for company, the wind whistling through a crack in the window. I lay awake listening to Megan's muffled crying through the wall, my own heart splintering with every sob. Yet even then, I refused to break. Every morning I watered Frank's roses, swept the front step, and smiled at neighbors as if nothing had changed. But inside I built a quiet resolve, a promise to myself and to Megan that I wouldn't let Scott or Charles steal what truly mattered. One night, in the hush between midnight and dawn, Megan crept into the garage. Her eyes were swollen, her hands shaking. She pressed a note into my palm. "Mom, I'm sorry. I see it now. I'll help you any way I can. I promise." That promise became our new foundation. I watched the house from my cot that night, thinking of all the things a family can survive and all the ways it can break. If Scott thought he'd pushed me out for good, he was wrong. Sometimes you have to lose your place to find your power. What would you do if your own family turned you out into the dark? Sometimes the walls that keep you safe are the same ones you have to tear down. Sometimes, when the walls come crashing down, it's not just family secrets that get exposed. It's everything you've ever tried to hide. The morning the news vans rolled onto our street, you could feel the change in the air. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Reporters called out questions as they walked the block. "Charles Reynolds, what about the missing money? The threats? Is it true about the house?" By noon, angry crowds had gathered outside the offices of Reynolds Financial. Some were people I knew, parents from church, small business owners, even the woman who once brought soup after Frank's funeral. They all looked the same, tired, furious, desperate. Megan and I watched from the kitchen window as Charles's world unraveled, one headline at a time. Inside, Scott was coming apart at the seams. He hadn't shaved in days. His eyes ringed red from his sleepless nights. Megan tried to reason with him. "Scott, you need to tell the truth. You can't hide from this." He only snapped. "It's not that simple. They want blood. And if we don't fix this, they'll come after all of us." I heard him whispering into his phone at night, pacing the dark. "Dad, they're threatening the family. They want more than money. They want the house. I need more time. I need Megan to sign. Without her signature, we're finished." Meanwhile, Charles's troubles had gone from legal to dangerous. One evening, I saw Charles standing outside the garage, speaking in low, urgent tones to a heavy-set man with a jagged scar on his cheek. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but the threat was clear. "You promised us repayment," the man said, voice flat. "We want your house as collateral. No more excuses." Charles tried to argue, but the man just shook his head, stepping closer. "You know the rules. If you can't pay, we collect in other ways." After the man left, Charles stormed inside, slamming doors. The next morning, Scott cornered Megan in the hallway, desperation pouring off him. "Megan, please," he pleaded. "You have to talk to your mother. If she would just sign the deed, we could save the house. Dad's in real danger. We're all in danger." Megan's voice was barely above a whisper. "And what about my mom? What about the danger you put her in? You lied to me, Scott. About everything." Scott's anger boiled over. "Don't you get it? This is bigger than any of us. If you loved me, you'd do this for our family." For the first time, Megan stood her ground. "I won't let you hurt my mom anymore. I won't be the weapon you use to destroy her." She left him standing in the hall, stunned. That night, she moved a small cot into the garage beside me, tears in her eyes, but her back straight with resolve. It was time to fight back. I called our family lawyer, Mr. Dalton, A man with gray hair, quick eyes, and a memory for details that made most people squirm. "I need you to look over some documents," I said, my voice steady. "It's about the deed, and about my daughter's safety." We met in his quiet office the next day. I brought the real deed, tucked safely in my purse. Dalton read through the paperwork, nodding. "Linda, this is ironclad. They can't touch this house without your signature. No one can force you to sign. If anyone tries, you call me." For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. Back at home, Scott and Charles had taken over the main house. Our names were scrubbed from the mailbox, our pictures removed from the living room walls. Scott brought in new locks, had Megan's car towed from the driveway, boxed up our clothes and left them on the porch. But they still couldn't move forward. They needed the real deed, and they didn't have it. That night, I took Megan to Dalton's office. In that quiet, lamp-lit room, I laid out the full truth, the real deed, the fake copies Scott had tried to push, the insurance documents Frank and I had drawn up years ago. Megan's eyes filled with tears as she read the lines, her hands shaking. "Mom, you saved us, even when I doubted you. You never stopped protecting me." I hugged her tight. "That's what mothers do, baby. We don't give up." Dalton leaned forward. "You're both safe for now. But this isn't over. Be careful. If they get desperate, they might try anything." Megan squeezed my hand, a new determination shining through her fear. "They can take everything, but not us, Mom. Not us." Meanwhile, out on the street, the news vans still prowled. Debt collectors circled like wolves. Charles drank alone in his study, planning new schemes. Scott grew thin and wild-eyed, haunted by the storm he'd helped unleash. But in the garage, Megan and I made plans of our own. "I want to start over," she said softly. "No more secrets, no more lies. Just you and me. And the truth." And for the first time, as the storm raged outside, I believed we could. The game wasn't finished. They wanted our house, our names, our lives. But they'd have to get through me first. Because when debts come due, the only thing more dangerous than a cornered animal is a mother protecting her child. Have you ever had to fight for your home? For your family's future? If you had to choose, would you protect the people you love, even if it meant standing against your own blood? The house was no longer a home. It was a battlefield. Every wall, every pipe, every wire a front in a war no one else could see. Charles and Scott had turned desperate, cornered by lawsuits, creditors, and a community that now saw them as pariahs. But desperation, I'd learned, can be more dangerous than rage. It started small, as it always does. The porch light flickered out one stormy night. Then the breaker box tripped, again and again, until the kitchen stayed dark. Megan found her car on blocks, all 4 tires slashed, and a note under the windshield. "Leave while you can." That night, someone threw a brick through the laundry window. The glass scattered across the floor, sparkling like ice. Megan and I swept it up in silence, each of us pretending not to see the fear in the other's eyes. Next came the water. At 3 a.m, the pipes burst. The basement flooded, drowning old boxes of photographs and Frank's childhood trophies. I waded through ankle-deep water, teeth chattering, as Megan sobbed over ruined memories. The insurance adjuster shook his head. Looks like sabotage, ma'am. You need to be careful." I knew who was behind it all. Charles, furious, humiliated, with nothing left to lose. He'd lost his grip on the company, the town, even his own family. And now, in the twilight of his power, he would rather see it all burn than let us keep a single brick. Scott changed, too. He no longer tried to charm or reason. He moved through the house like a ghost, eyes red, hands trembling. I heard him shouting on the phone late at night, begging his father to just stop, to think about Megan. Charles only grew more unhinged. "They made us beggars, son. If you can't win, you destroy. That's how men survive." The police came more than once. After the second break-in, someone jimmied the back door, trashed the kitchen, left muddy footprints up the stairs. The officers suggested a restraining order. But restraining orders mean nothing to men with nothing to lose. Neighbors started avoiding us. Sandra still came by, but she'd lock her car and glance over her shoulder before bringing in groceries. Megan joked about it, but her laughter was brittle. "We're poison now, Mom. No one wants to get involved." One afternoon I came home to the scent of gasoline. The garden, the roses Frank planted for every anniversary, was a blackened ruin. Firefighters said it was arson. Megan screamed when she saw the ashes. It was all I had left of Dad. I pulled her close, fighting my own tears. "They can burn the roses, but not our roots." That night, we barricaded ourselves in the garage, the only room left untouched. I slept with my phone clutched to my chest, replaying Mr. Dalton's warning. If they get desperate, they might try anything. Megan hardly slept. I found her at dawn, staring at the driveway. "I can't take this anymore, Mom. I'm scared all the time. I want to run, but we don't run," I finished, brushing hair from her face. "That's how we lose everything Frank built." Scott watched us from the window, eyes hollow. He tried to speak to Megan once, but she shut the door in his face. I caught him in the hallway, staring at the wedding photo on the wall. "I didn't want this," he whispered. "He's not thinking straight." I met his gaze. "You're not helpless, Scott. You can stop this." He shook his head, voice breaking. "You don't know what he's capable of." But I did. Charles was the kind of man who'd torch the world if he couldn't own it. As the days dragged on, Charles's attacks escalated. Someone cut the power lines. We huddled in the dark, Megan clutching my hand as wind howled through broken shutters. The following morning, we found hateful graffiti sprayed across the front door. Thieves in blood-red paint. I called the police again. This time they took statements, set up extra patrols, promised to monitor the house. But Charles was always one step ahead. He knew how to slip through the cracks. Then, the final warning. Late one night, Megan shook me awake. Smoke curled under the door. I grabbed the emergency kit, yanked Megan outside, hearts pounding. In the backyard, the shed blazed, a wall of fire licking toward the house. Sirens wailed as firefighters arrived, dousing the flames before they reached the porch. The fire chief's face was grave. "This wasn't random. Someone wanted to scare you." That was the breaking point. Megan and I stood in the smoky yard, wrapped in blankets, neighbors gawking from behind curtains. I saw the guilt written all over Scott's face as he hovered near the crowd, torn between loyalty and terror. The next day, police questioned Scott. He said little, but I saw something change in his eyes. A crack in the wall his father built. That night, Scott wandered the halls like a restless shadow, lost between rage and regret. I caught a glimpse of him in the darkened dining room, standing alone before our wedding photo, his reflection fractured by the glass. On the mantel, next to the photo, sat a faded baseball glove, his mother's last gift before she left. I watched as Scott picked it up, fingers tracing old stitching, eyes filling with memories. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe something finally broke inside him. But in that quiet hour, I saw the old Scott resurface, the gentle boy who once hid in the garden to escape his father's shouting, who used to promise his mother he'd never become the kind of man who made people afraid. But he had. Charles's voice echoed in his head. You win or you get nothing. Weakness is for losers. There's only one way to survive. Take what's yours. No apologies. Scott's fists clenched. For years he'd been trying to live up to his father's demands, copying every rule, every threat, until he couldn't recognize himself in the mirror anymore. He set the glove down, shoulders shaking. I'm done living someone else's life, I heard him whisper. I'm not Charles. I don't want to be. Then, for the first time, he looked for me, not as an enemy, but as a lifeline. He found me and Megan in the garage, huddled together in the pale morning light. He knelt before us, tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, he choked. I let him make me a monster. But I want out. I want to help. Whatever it takes, even if it means turning him in, even if it means going to jail. I can't keep repeating my father's mistakes. I want my own life back, and I want you both safe. I reached for his hand. Then let's end this, Scott. Together. That morning, Scott called the detective. He told them everything about the sabotage, the threats, the arson, and agreed to help the police lay a trap for Charles. For the first time, the cycle was about to break. But I knew. Every ending has a price, and the reckoning had only just begun. They say some storms break everything, but sometimes what breaks is a curse that's lived too long. The days after the fire, Megan and I barricaded ourselves in the garage, sleeping in shifts, always half listening for the next attack. The house, our home, was scarred, roses burned, pipes burst, locks battered, hope flickering like a candle in a broken window. But for the first time, we were not alone. Because Scott had changed sides. He didn't tell Charles, of course. He played his role, downcast, obedient, pretending to hate us as much as his father did. But behind the mask, Scott was planning something else. The police had warned us. If you want to put an end to this, we need evidence. Charles won't go quietly. Let him think you're still on his side, then give us the proof. Scott swallowed his shame and nodded. Tell me what to do. So we laid a trap. For days, Scott fed Charles just enough fear, just enough urgency. Mom's still got the deed somewhere. I know Megan's hiding things for her. If we don't finish this soon, we lose everything. Charles bought every word, desperate and angry, pacing like a wolf in a shrinking cage. Then we force their hand, Scott. I want that safe. I want the real deed. And if they won't give it, we'll make sure they regret it. The night Charles picked was rainy, the kind of darkness that blurs all lines between past and future. He told Scott to unlock the side door. I'll do what you couldn't, he sneered, Stay out of my way. Scott texted me and Megan. Tonight, stay in the garage. Don't answer if Dad comes. We huddled together, nerves jangling, listening to every creak and groan. Sandra had called earlier. I can come pick you up, Linda. I refused. I wouldn't run anymore. Not from my home. Not from Charles. Not from my own fear. Sometime after midnight, we heard it. A muffled crash, glass shattering, footsteps thudding across the kitchen tiles. Charles had broken in, thinking Scott was his lookout. He rifled through drawers, slamming cabinets, searching for the safe. When he couldn't find it, he started tearing pictures from the wall, tossing bookshelves, cursing our names. Hidden outside, in the rain-soaked yard, the police waited. Scott, wired for sound, followed Charles through the house, every word and movement recorded. Dad, just leave it. We'll figure something out. Charles snarled. Weakness, always weakness. If you'd been half the man I wanted, none of this would be happening. Scott's hands shook, but he stood his ground. I'm done, Dad. I don't want to be like you. I'm not burning down my life for your mistakes. That was the moment Charles lost control. He lunged for the locked basement door, shouting that the safe must be hidden there. When it wouldn't budge, he grabbed a crowbar, hacking at the wood until splinters flew. Scott tried to stop him, pleading, but Charles shoved him aside, rage blind and wild. That was the cue. Police burst in, shouting, Charles Reynolds! Step away from the door! Hands in the air! Charles froze, crowbar raised, face contorted with fury and disbelief. Scott, you did this? Scott just nodded, tears in his eyes. It ends here, Dad. No more. They cuffed Charles, read him his rights, and marched him through the ruined hallway, past the photos of family he'd tried to erase. The neighbors peeked out as the sirens flickered, seeing the man they once feared finally powerless. In the garage, Megan collapsed into my arms. We listened to the muffled voices outside, the fading echo of Charles's threats replaced by the steady, blessed hush of rain. It was over. But in the wreckage, grief bloomed beside relief. The next morning, police finished their work, photographing damage, gathering evidence, escorting Scott to the station. He turned to Megan, voice cracking. I know you'll never forgive me, but I had to break the chain. I'm sorry for every lie, every time I made you feel small. Megan wiped her eyes. You're not your father, Scott. You chose better, even if it was late. For the first time, Scott seemed lighter, as if laying down a weight he'd carried his whole life. I just want you and your mom safe. Maybe now you finally can be. We watched them drive him away, Charles raging in the back seat, Scott silent, but unbroken. That afternoon, Sandra brought over a casserole and fresh flowers, pink roses, hope in a battered jar. You survived, Linda. That's what matters. Now it's time to rebuild. We swept up the broken glass, washed the soot from the porch, and let the house breathe again. In the garden, where nothing but ash remained, Megan knelt and began planting new shoots, this time together. Some storms break families apart. Ours broke the curse that bound us. The courthouse echoed with a silence thicker than any storm. As the judge read the final verdict, it was as if the past had finally let us go. Charles Reynolds, for arson, conspiracy, intimidation, and the attempted unlawful seizure of property, This court sentences you to 15 years without parole. All assets gained through fraud and coercion are to be seized, liquidated, and used to repay your victims." Charles's face, so often stone, finally cracked, grief and fury mixing as they led him away. The judge's eyes softened just a touch as she turned to Scott. "Scott Reynolds, you aided these crimes, but your cooperation and remorse changed the outcome. This court sentences you to 3 years with parole eligibility and restitution to the families harmed." Scott met Megan's gaze across the courtroom, the weight of regret and hope in his eyes. She offered a small, tremulous nod. Not forgiveness yet, but not hatred either. Maybe in time, something better. I stood before the judge as Linda Brooks, legal owner of the house Frank built. The court confirmed what we always knew. This home remains in your family, protected by law. May it be a place of peace at last. In the weeks that followed, Megan and I picked up the pieces. There were days we still startled at every knock, still wept for what we'd lost. But as we patched walls, scrubbed away the soot, and pulled weeds from the garden, we started to breathe again. Sandra came over every Saturday, armed with coffee and stories. Neighbors who once crossed the street now brought cuttings for the new roses. The foundation of the old house stayed, but every board, every nail, every bloom was chosen by us. No longer a shrine to the past, but a promise to the future. Megan, searching for a way to make amends, found purpose in the ashes. "Let's make sure no one ends up like us, Mom. No more loan sharks. No more fear." Together, we launched the Rose Fund, offering zero-interest loans to struggling families in our county. The first application we received was from a single mother trying to save her bakery. Megan approved it herself, smiling through tears. "And Scott?" He wrote from prison, letters full of apologies, memories, and hopes for someday planting something good from the ruins. Megan read every word. Some she answered, some she saved. "Forgiveness," she said, "is not a switch. It's a garden, and gardens take time." On warm evenings, we sat on the rebuilt porch, watching new roses take root where fire once burned. The house was still standing. We were still standing. Our story, unfinished, full of scars, but blooming anyway. If you've ever fought for your family, your home, or your own peace, know this: storms end. And sometimes, what you plant in the aftermath becomes your greatest legacy. What would you build if given a second chance? Share your story below. Someone out there is waiting for hope.